I was on my knees on the cold floor of the east hallway when the crying started again. It wasn't an ordinary cry. It was high-pitched, torn, desperate, the kind of sound that cuts through stone, skin, and pride, the kind of sound that would make even the most experienced alphas clench their jaws and recoil. "Get that thing out of here," someone whispered behind me. "It doesn't have a wolf. It shouldn't even be on this floor," another added. The silver tray trembled in my hands. Warm milk, soothing herbs, everything prepared for the twin princes of the kingdom of the grey moon, and all useless. As always, the nurses had failed. The healers had been expelled. 2 omegas of noble lineage had been sent away crying. And me? I was just the kitchen maid, the defective omega, the one born without a wolf. "Josie," the housekeeper growled under her breath, gripping my arm too tightly. "You're going to clean up what they spilled here and get out. Don't look. Don't come near. Royal blood isn't for people like you." But before I could answer, the scream doubled in intensity. 2 at the same time, the princes, the heirs, the offspring of the Alpha King. And something inside me, something that had never responded to anything before, stirred. "They're not going to stop," I muttered without realizing I had spoken aloud. The housekeeper stared at me as if I had committed blasphemy. "You wouldn't dare." Perhaps it was exhaustion. Perhaps it was desperation. Or perhaps for the first time in my life, I simply had nothing left to lose. I took a step forward. The crying stopped. Not slowly. Not little by little. It stopped. Dry. Absolute. Silence fell over the hallway like a blade. Everyone looked at me, and I knew, at that exact moment, that I had just crossed a line that no one like me should ever cross. My name is Josie, and in the kingdom of the grey moon, names don't matter as much as what runs in your blood, or in my case, what never did. I was born in a border village, the daughter of no one, no clan, no mark, no wolf. Here, that made me less than an omega. It made me a mistake. Omegas exist to serve, to warm beds, to produce heirs when fate allows, but at least they have a wolf, an instinct, a recognized function. I didn't have any of that. My first heat never came. My transformation never happened. The healers said I was broken. The pack decided I was useful, just enough not to be discarded, so they put me in the kitchen, where nobody needed to look at me for very long, where the smell of onions hid the fact that I didn't smell like anyone else. That's where I learned to lower my head before I was told to, and maybe that's why I was there now. Maybe that's why no one stopped me, because who cares what a maid without a wolf does until it's too late? As I made my way to the prince's chamber, my mind screamed that this was madness, but my body seemed to know exactly where to go. Before we continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I always like to know how far these stories reach. The kingdom of the grey moon was not governed by written laws. It was governed by hierarchy. At the top, the Alpha King. Below him, the Pack Council. Then the alphas of smaller clans, betas, omegas, and at the bottom of it all, people like me. King Alpha didn't need to speak to be obeyed. His presence was enough. They said that since the Queen's escape, he had become even more ruthless, that the pain had hardened him, that the loss had transformed him into something that not even the oldest wolves dared to challenge. And now he had heirs. 2 twins, alpha pups who rejected the world from day one. The council was in a panic. If the princes did not calm down, if they continued to reject milk, touch, smell, their weakness would be seen. And weakness in that kingdom always attracts enemies. That's why nobody questioned it when all the nannies were replaced. That's why nobody protested when the healers were dismissed. That's why nobody noticed when a kitchen maid crossed the forbidden corridor. But there were rules, and I knew them better than anyone. Maids are not allowed in the royal chambers. Defective omegas do not touch alpha pups. Servants without a wolf do not form bonds. The punishment for breaking any of these rules was not a trial. It was a disappearance. And as I pushed open the door to the prince's room, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it wanted to run away first, a certainty formed within me. If anyone found out what was about to happen, I wouldn't leave that palace alive. The prince's room smelled of spilled milk, burnt herbs, and fear. The kind of fear that isn't spoken aloud. The heavy curtains were half closed, blocking out the daylight. 2 nurses stood leaning against the wall, exhausted, their eyes red from trying and failing. In the center of the room, the oak cradles were surrounded by symbols of protection hastily scribbled on the floor. Nothing had worked. The cries of the pups echoed in my chest like hammer blows, an instinctive, primal sound that made any wolf want to howl along or run away. I did neither. I approached slowly. "She shouldn't be here," whispered one of the nurses, but there was no strength in her voice, only weariness. I stopped next to the first crib. The prince on the left was red-faced, his fists clenched, his little body arched from crying so much. His eyes, golden even though so small, fixated on me, and they blinked. The crying faltered. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. "That's impossible," someone murmured behind me. I reached out my hand. It was trembling. I didn't touch the puppy. I just stayed there, breathing. The second prince turned his face towards me. His crying also failed. Then, as if someone had pulled an invisible string, they both fell silent at the same time. The entire room remained motionless. I heard my own breathing. I heard the distant crackle of a fireplace. I heard the dry sound of a knee hitting the floor behind me. One of the nurses had fallen to her knees. They stopped," she whispered, as if afraid of waking them. The first prince held out his little hand. His fingers closed on the worn fabric of my apron. The second one did the same. And something happened. Something warm, deep, ancient. A gentle pressure in the center of my chest, as if I had been recognized by something that had no name. "No," I murmured. "That's not possible." But the puppies disagreed. It didn't take long. Nothing in that palace stayed secret for long, especially something like this. First came the housekeeper, pale as wax. Then 2 members of the council. Then guards. When the door finally swung open, bringing with it the metallic scent of authority, I was still standing there, the 2 princes silent, clinging to me as if I were the only solid thing in the world. "What's going on here?" The voice cut through the air. I didn't need to look to know who it was. The puppy's silence was answer enough. The eldest advisor stepped forward, his eyes wide. They accepted her, not who, she, as if I were an object out of place. "Get that maid out of here immediately," ordered the housekeeper, regaining her voice. "Before the king." The first prince started crying the moment someone tried to push me away. The second one followed. The sound was as violent as before. "Stop!" the advisor growled. "Don't touch her!" They all froze, me too. "If the heirs reject any other—" He swallowed hard. "We can't force them." His eyes landed on me, coldly assessing me. "What is your name, maid?" "Josie, sir." "No, Wolf," he finished, as if it were an accusation. I lowered my head. "Yes, sir." The silence stretched on. "This is going to cause problems," someone muttered. I already knew. I wasn't praised, I wasn't thanked, I was tolerated. And that difference mattered more than anything else. I was only summoned when the princes were inconsolable. Never in front of the king, never before a full court. I would walk down the service corridors. I would leave before anyone could call my name out loud. The nurses were whispering. "It's unnatural. They say puppies can smell weakness or dirt." One of them laughed when I walked by. "Be careful," he said. "You'll end up believing it's important." I couldn't believe it. But the princes, they knew. Whenever I entered, those little golden eyes followed me. Their tiny hands reached out, their bodies relaxed. And every time I left, the crying would return. The council began to discuss. The king had not yet appeared. And that, for some reason, scared me more than if he had been there the whole time. I had never seen the Alpha King up close. but it wasn't necessary. The entire palace breathed his presence. They said he had killed 3 rival alphas with his bare hands, that he had united packs with blood and ancient oaths, that his wolf was so dominant that it made others kneel without realizing it. And now, they said he didn't want to look at his own children, that the Queen's escape had left something broken inside him. If he finds out that a maid without a wolf is touching the princes, whispered one of the maids, she'll disappear, the other added. I pretended not to hear. But each time the sound of heavier footsteps echoed in the hallways, my stomach clenched, because I knew that wasn't protection, it was a postponement. And when King Alpha finally decided to act, no one there would save me. On the 4th night, while I was quietly rocking the princes to sleep, I heard the door open behind me. She wasn't a nanny. The smell changed, stronger, darker, alpha. My body stiffened. "Who's there?" the male voice asked. The princes shifted restlessly. "I will not come. If he took one more step, if he saw my hands on them..." Perhaps that was the last thing I would do in my life. Before we continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I always like to know how far these stories reach. I recognize the smell before I recognize the voice. Pure alpha, ancient, dominant enough to make the air feel heavier. The princes stirred in my arms, small growls escaping their still fragile throats. Not from fear, from alert. They can sense you, I thought, my heart racing. I will not turn my face away. If I looked, it would become too real. "Answer," the voice commanded. I swallowed hard. I am the maid, sir." There was a short silence. "Evaluator. Maids don't come in here at night." I was called. Half the truth has always been the only thing I've been allowed to say. The princes calmed down again, as if the mere sound of my voice was enough. The alpha behind me noticed. I felt it. "They're quiet," he said suspiciously. "They were shouting minutes ago." My whole body tensed up. "They calmed down when I arrived." Another silence. Heavier. "Turn around. I will come." The man in front of me was not the king. I knew this because I was alive. But even so, his power made my knees weak. Broad shoulders, a hard expression, grey eyes that missed nothing. "What is your name?" "Josie, sir." "You are the maid without the wolf." It wasn't a question. "Yes." He observed me, as if I were an inconvenient enigma. "This won't last," he said finally. "Nothing outside the established hierarchy lasts in this palace." Then he left. The princes cried for a full 5 minutes after he closed the door. She arrived the following morning, chosen by the council, approved by lineage, perfect in everything I wasn't. Lady Marielle, omega of ancient blood, beautiful, scented of rare flowers and trained submission. When she entered the prince's room, all eyes turned to her. "She's suitable," I heard someone say. "Finally, someone up to the task," murmured another voice. I was leaning against the wall, invisible as always. Marielle smiled at me, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "So it's you," she said softly. "The maid who thinks she's been chosen." I didn't reply. She leaned over the cribs. "Hello, my darlings," she whispered, extending her delicate hands. The princes stared at her. For a second, there was silence. My heart almost stopped. Then, the crying burst out, loud, furious. Pure rejection. Marielle recoiled, frightened. "That's never happened to me before," she said, offended. The council exchanged tense glances. "Call the maid," someone ordered. I approached. The crying stopped as soon as they saw me. The silence fell like a slap in the face. Marielle looked at me as if I had committed a crime. "That's a trick," she accused, "some kind of spell." "She has no power," the advisor replied, but without conviction. Marielle smiled again. This time, there was a promise there. "So let's see how long this lasts." From that day on, everything got worse. Marielle became ever-present, always trying, always failing, and every flaw was placed on me. "You conditioned them," they said. "You created dependency," they accused. That's not natural, they whispered down the hallways. I was only called when she failed. Never before. Never after. While she wore fine dresses, I continued to wear my stained apron. While she sat near the cribs, I remained standing. While she received promises, I received orders. One night, I overheard something. The king doesn't want that maid near his children, someone whispered. Then why is she still here? Because the princes won't accept anyone else. They'll get over it, Marielle replied coldly. Pups forget. My stomach churned. That night I packed up what little I had, an old dress, a hair ribbon. I knew what was coming next. When the princes grew up enough, when they no longer needed me, I would be discarded, missing. I was almost leaving through the back when I heard the crying, different, weaker. I ran back. The princes were pale, restless, refusing Marielle's touch as she tried to smile at the council. Call the maid, someone ordered angrily. Everyone looked at me. I still had my bag in my hand. If I left now, maybe I would survive. If I stayed, I might never be able to leave again. The princes saw me, and they smiled. That morning, while I was rocking them, I felt it again. The pressure in my chest, stronger, clearer, as if something were trying to remember me. An ancient word echoed silently in my mind. Link. No, I whispered. This can't be happening to me. But the princes slept peacefully, close to my heart. And somewhere in the palace, I had this strange feeling that someone had finally started paying attention. Now tell me in the comments, do you think she should have left or waited until the end? I want to know what you would do in her place. If at any point during this part of the story you felt anger, hope, or that lump in your throat, leave a like. It shows me that you're enjoying the video. I stopped fighting the day I heard my fate being decided as if I didn't exist. I was standing outside the council room with a tray in my hands when Marielle's voice came through the door. She has already fulfilled her role. My stomach sank. The puppies are more stable, said one of the councillors. We can start to reduce contact. They'll adapt, Marielle replied. Puppies forget quickly when the bond is broken early. Link. They knew, or at least they suspected so. And the maid? Someone asked. The pause was too short. She'll be sent back to the village, said another, or somewhere where she won't cause trouble. I knew at that moment that somewhere was not a place. It was the end. I returned to the room that night with an empty heart. The princes slept peacefully, clinging to the edges of the crib as if they were still searching for me, even in their unconsciousness. I ran my fingers through her light-colored hairs. You'll be okay, I lied. I should never have been here. When I stepped away, the first one whimpered. The second one stirred, restless. I forced my feet to keep going. If I stayed, they would break me first. King Alpha sees me. I didn't plan on meeting the king, but he was in the hallway, property, huge, too real. His golden eyes fell upon me like a sentence. You, he said. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. I fell to my knees. Pardon me, Your Majesty. He watched me for a long time. You're the one who calms them down. It wasn't a question. Yes. No wolf, no title, no rights whatsoever. Each word was a blade. Yes, Your Majesty. The silence stretched on. Then why do my children scream when you walk away? My chest hurt. I don't know. Lie. He approached. I felt the weight of his wolf. Ancient, dominant, furious. Stay away from them, he ordered. If I find out you touched my heirs without permission. He didn't finish the sentence. It wasn't necessary. When he turned to leave, my legs almost gave way. I waited. I hoped it would hurt less. It didn't hurt. That night I tidied everything up again. This time, without hesitation, the palace was silent as I took my last step out of the prince's chamber. The crying started instantly, loud, desperate, cruel. I stopped, my hands clenched into fists. No, I whispered to myself, not this time. I kept walking. Behind me the sound broke something in the air. Something old, something that refuses to be abandoned. I didn't know yet, but that was the night King Alpha lost control. and everything started to change. I wasn't born without a wolf. That was the first lie. I only understood when the pain overwhelmed me in the hallway, far from the prince's room. It wasn't physical. It was as if something inside me was being ripped from a place where it had always belonged. My chest burned. My body reacted. My blood responded. "That's not possible," I murmured. "I don't have a wolf." "Yes," said the voice behind me. "He just never woke up." King Alpha was there. Not furious, not shouting, observing. "The puppies didn't calm down because of affection," he continued, "nor out of habit. They bonded with you because they recognized who you are." I shook my head. "I am a maid, a defective Omega." "You're a birth guardian," he corrected. "A rare type, ancient, almost extinct." He moved closer. "Some women are born with the wolf sleeping inside them," she explained. "Not to lead, not to dominate, but to protect alpha heirs before they even know who they are." My heart was beating so hard it hurt. Guardians only awaken when they come into contact with royal cubs, and when they are chosen. The words fit together like pieces I never knew existed. That's why I never went into heat. That's why I never transformed. That's why my scent was always different. "And that's why the council called you defective," the king said coldly. "Because guardians don't serve the system. They only serve the bond." The prince's cries echoed in the distance, weak and unsteady. My body responded immediately. "They sense when you move away," the king continued, "because the bond is already active. It's not emotional, it's biological, primal." I swallowed hard. "So, if I leave, they get sick," he said, "and they can die." A heavy silence fell. "Now you understand why they kept you in the kitchen. Why they erased your birth. Why they said you didn't have a wolf." I understood. I was never useless. I was dangerous. "If the council discovers that a guardian has been living hidden inside the palace," he began, "they're going to eliminate me," I added. The king nodded. "And that's why nobody can know." He stared at me, serious, definitive. "You're not leaving. Not as a maid. Not as a rejected Omega. You're staying because now we know the truth." Behind us, the crying had completely stopped. The secret had been revealed, explained, and now the world would have to submit to it. The council was convened at dawn. There was no announcement, there was no warning. When I was summoned to the upper room, I was still wearing the same simple maid's dress. That was how the king wanted it. No adornments, no titles. Raw. Marielle was there, seated among the advisors, wearing a dress that was far too light for someone who believed she had already won. When she saw me, she raised an eyebrow, briefly surprised, and then smiled. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing her head. "I'm glad you made a sensible decision." The king did not answer. He simply raised his hand. The princes were brought. The moment they saw me, they both stirred, stretching out their arms restlessly. A murmur ran through the hall. "Calm them down," ordered the king. Not Marielle. To me. I took a step forward. The crying stopped. The silence was absolute. The oldest advisor turned pale. "That confirms the bond," he murmured. Marielle stood up suddenly. "That's manipulation," he accused. "A maid can't—" "Silence!" growled the king. He turned to the council. "For months you called this woman defective," he said. "You humiliated her. You hid her. You used her." His golden eyes gleamed. "And yet, she was the only one my children recognized." Marielle tried to speak again. "You failed," the king said, now looking directly at her. "Not because you're an Omega, but because you tried to replace a bond that doesn't belong to you." She turned pale. "She will be sent back to her clan," he continued. "No position, no promise, no return." The murmur grew louder. The king turned to me. "The maid Josie no longer exists." My heart stopped. "Before this council, I recognize you as guardian of the heirs of the kingdom of the Grey Moon." An ancient symbol was brought forward, a forgotten medallion, marked with runes that I now recognized without knowing how. When he placed it in my hands, something awakened. Hot, alive, my wolf. Not to roar, not to dominate, for protection. The princes smiled. The entire hall knelt down, for the first time, not out of fear, but out of recognition. I didn't need to disappear anymore. I had a place. If you've made it this far, it's because you understand that some stories aren't just entertainment, they're about emotional justice. Subscribe to the channel and come back often. Thank you very much.